Well, this is Dateline News and Conversation. It's Saturday, February 21st. Um, the topics tonight, and this is just for starters, Iran. Is war imminent? Part of this discussion has to revolve around Donald Trump. Uh, he's commanding the 24/7 news cycle, but now he's unhappy with his own Supreme Court. He called them unpatriotic because they struck down uh, a lot of these or most of these sanctions that he was leveling on countries all over the world. And they said it exceeded his power, his authority. We've got other topics. Israel and the United States, Donald Trump, in his own words, we may be targeting Iranian officials. Now, this is, really blatant. It's right out there in the open. There's another thing that I read today in the news that has everything to do with what's going on in the Middle East. Trump reported that the U.S. is finalizing a deal with Saudi Arabia that could allow it to pursue nuclear weapons. Now, in that same region, Pakistan and India have nuclear weapons. What could go wrong? My guest tonight, he's back, Peter Kuznick. He is a professor of history at American University and the founder of the Nuclear Studies Institute. Peter, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Regis. You asked a good question there. What could go wrong with that scenario?
So, Peter, I know you're being interviewed daily by different organizations really around the world.
Yeah.
I'm thinking every day when I read the news, should I bother Peter and ask him to come on the show? Because
it's never a bother to come on your show. It's a treat. It's a treat for me.
Oh, thank you. I always enjoy it, and I'm really grateful for our friendship. First of all, your thoughts on what's going on in and around Iran. There are two naval armadas. I just did some research today, and there are between 19 and 30 U.S. bases surrounding Iran. Some of them are just forward operating stations, but it's estimated that there's some 40 to 50,000 U.S. military personnel surrounding Iran. Plus, you have to believe that on each of those aircraft carriers, there are somewhere around 4,000 American military personnel. I don't know how many fighter planes, helicopters, whatever. Iran has warned Trump and the United States they all will be targeted. We're not even talking about Israel right now. So, Peter, what's your assessment today, Saturday, the 21st, of this situation that many people thought could actually result in open fire today?
Yeah, Trump said throughout the 10 to 15 days, but that could be just a subterfuge, a distraction. We've seen him do that before. We don't know. We think that, or I think that the attack is likely because Trump does not to live up to his nickname of Taco, which stands for Trump always chickens out. So Trump was figuring that he could probably coerce, threaten the Iranians into giving him what he wants by putting all that firepower in the area, his armada, as he called it, without having to actually go to war. But he's dealing with a government in Iran that it's effectively an existential crisis for the government. And so they are not showing any willingness to back down in this confrontation. The two sides are making demands for which there's very little middle ground. Because you have to put it in several contexts. Let me put it in the context. The big news this week in the US before yesterday was the arrest of Prince Andrew. The fact that the Brits and the Norwegians and a lot of other people are actually demanding accountability over the Epstein files is huge in the United States, because the main cover up of the Epstein files is coming from the White House, coming from the Trump regime. And so Trump didn't want those files released in the first place. He certainly doesn't want the other 3 million files to be released. Keeps saying there's nothing to see here. This is over. When his name is in the files, minimally tens of thousands of times, but up to possibly 1 million times. So Trump was the main enabler, or appeared to be, for a period of time when Epstein said Trump was his best friend, closest associate. And Trump is trying to claim, number one, that he had nothing to do with underage girls, which may or may not be true, but true that he didn't know anything about it, which can't be true. So Trump is deeply implicated. He wanted to change the subject. But the news that came down yesterday was not the kind of change of the subject and distraction that he wanted, when the Supreme Court finally, for the first meaningful time, reined in his power and said what he's doing is illegal, what his tariffs are illegal, claiming that this is an emergency and therefore he had to levy all these tariffs around the world. The Supreme Court said is nonsense and is unconstitutional. And so Trump was forced to back down. The tariffs have been his way to bludgeon other countries into, number one, bribing him with their investments in the US and just giving money to the US, or number two, doing his bidding in other ways. And he's got this 19th century view of economics, and thinks that anytime the US runs a trade deficit with another country, that country is unfairly taking advantage of the United States. It is such an economic ignoramus that it's just childish, his view of things. But this is the heart of his foreign policy, is the use of tariffs and sanctions to coerce people to do his bidding. But when it comes to Iran, so Trump has suffered two major setbacks this week, which means to me that war with Iran becomes even more likely. For Trump to scurry away with his tail between his legs over Iran after he's being pressured by Netanyahu to finish off the Iranian government. The Iranian government is highly repressive. How much support it has within Iran, I have no idea, because I don't think there's meaningful polling going on. So some of Iran experts have argued with me that the Ayatollahs, Khamenei, the Revolutionary Guard do have a lot of support in Iran. I find that hard to believe, because I know that I would hate to live with a government like that, as I hate to live with the government that I have in the United States now. But in any case, the Iranian government is showing no signs of giving in to Trump's absurd demands on Iran. When the United States had a great deal, the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, that the Russians played a very big part in negotiating in 2015 when it was signed. This was Obama's biggest foreign policy achievement. So, of course, Trump wanted to blow it up, which he did in 2018 when he abrogated the JCPOA. And he says he's going to have a bigger, better deal. Well, there's no bigger, better deal. And so, under that, Iran was enriching uranium to 2.67%. Now, Iran has been enriching to 60%. To get from 3% to 60% is very, very hard. To get from 60% to 90%, which you need for a bomb, is much easier. So this, thank you, Donald Trump. The Iranians also had mothballed something like 98% or a very high percentage of their centrifuges. Now they're back and functioning. So the United States bombed three of Iran's major nuclear research facilities in the 12-day war in June after Israel had gone in there and bombed the rest of the country. And then after that, Trump said it was a great success and that he obliterated Iran's nuclear program. Immediately, other branches of the U.S. government came out and said, well, no, we didn't obliterate or destroy them. We set them back. But so Trump now is saying that we got to go in there for three reasons, really. Number one, to make sure Iran's nuclear program cannot be reconstituted. Number two, because the Iranians government was killing protesters. So Trump, who doesn't want protesters in the United States to be out there and protest, and kills several of them and wounded and arrested far, far more, supports protests in Iran. You know, how contradictory can this guy be? Number three, he said he wants to get rid of Iran's missile program. Well, without its missile program, Iran will be defenseless and Israel will simply have its way with Iran. And number four, he says he wants to stop Iran's proxies in the region, the Houthis, Hezbollah, forces in Iraq and elsewhere. You know, Iran's position has already been weakened, but Iran is a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which gives it the right to develop nuclear power, the right to enrich uranium. Trump is saying there will be no uranium enrichment. And Khamenei and the government cannot accept that. They can't accept any of these terms. So it looks almost certain that the U.S. will authorize the assault on the Iranian government. But the other thing to keep in mind is that Trump has not made a case for this. One of the big discussions in the U.S. is that unlike George W. Bush, who in 2002 and 2003 spent a year, if not 2 years, making the case for the U.S. invasion of Iraq, it was based on lies, but he tried to make the case publicly. And finally, after Colin Powell's shameful appearance at the United Nations, the U.S. support for the invasion of Iraq went up from 33% to 50%. Well, but they made the effort. Trump has not even made the effort. He's not even made a public case for why the U.S. should go to war. He said, well, we did a great operation in Venezuela, and now we're going to do a great operation here. Well, nobody believes that. If the U.S. attacks Iran, Iran can cut off the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of world oil and gas flows, which would drive the price of oil and gas through the ceiling. They can attack. They've got a lot of missiles still. They can attack U.S. allies in the region. They can attack U.S. military assets. They can attack Israel. Israel has been using up a lot of its interceptors. The supply of interceptors is way down. We don't know how But if Iran has been able to reconstitute its missiles, but it has a very large and capable missile program, and its allies in the region are weakened, but they're not defeated. And so, what this could get the U.S. involved in a protracted war. It could have devastating consequences for U.S. assets in the region and U.S. allies. And the British have already said the U.S. cannot use British bases, whether in Britain or in Diego Garcia. The Saudis and the Emiratis have both said that they're not going to give, back in January, they said that the U.S. will not be allowed to use bomb from their bases in Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, partly because they don't want the Iranians to attack inside those countries, whether it's the energy operations, oil, or the bases. So in any case, this is viewed already as illegal internationally without any justification, being egged on by Netanyahu and the Israelis, with the reports coming out that the number of people killed in Gaza was far more than has been reported. So there's no moral authority, no justification, no international legality to this. But Trump is not in a position to want to back down and walk away right now, given the fact that he looks so weak, so much weaker and more illegitimate and illegal in what he's been doing already. So we're in a very bad situation because there probably will be war, and it could start at any time.
Moral authority, one of the last things you said. And this is really very frightening as far as I'm concerned, because when Trump was questioned recently by a reporter about international law, the United States Constitution, what guides him, I'm going to paraphrase, but basically he said, I'm guided by my own conscience, by my own morality.
Yeah, he said that international law does not constrain him.
Even or the United Nations.
The United, he's already created the Board of Peace, which is intended to be an alternative to the United Nations that he's going to run. He sets the agenda for, and he's chair for life. He's the president for life of this. Even after he's out of office, even in the grave, he's going to have authority to use to undo the United Nations. You know, as he said,
you know, the one good thing is the Pope. The Pope came out and said, "No deal. I'm not going to be part of that."
Right.
And when I read that, I was hoping that maybe the Pope could write an encyclical or a papal decree condemning what Donald Trump is doing. We'll have to see. It's very interesting because it's the first American Pope ever, and he certainly has a very profound insight into all of this. But I want to continue with a couple of other things that you said that I don't want to just gloss over. You mentioned that Trump could lose face if he backs down, and you mentioned Taco. Trump always chickens out. Peter, I think we both believe that a conflict is imminent. I don't see how it can be avoided. For that reason alone, that for Trump to back down now, he loses face not only in the United States, where I think his political power, how much he has left, is really dwindling quickly. He loses face with his sugar daddy. Well, I don't know if it's his sugar daddy, but his daddy, Netanyahu. Both of them are talking about taking out Iran's leadership. Israel has been doing that for the last number of years. And now Trump is even talking about taking out Iran's leadership. Khomeini and whoever else is part of that. A couple of other things that you mentioned. the Epstein Files. This is another major headache for Donald Trump. And as many people have been arguing, that Trump needs something to distract people from these revelations in the Epstein Files. You mentioned he's been named tens of thousands of times, maybe a million times, you said.
Jamie,
I have
my friend Jamie Raskin said threw out the million figure after going through the unredacted files.
Yeah. I have a very good friend for many, many years who is a firm believer in Donald Trump and everything he's doing. He believes everything Trump is doing is wonderful. When I mentioned, well, what about supporting genocide in Israel? He wouldn't go there. I listed a whole bunch of other things that Trump has done just in the last year.
Yeah.
He wouldn't go there. And I think he might be, and he's a very bright guy. He's not one of these redneck, ignorant people who are MAGA supporters. This guy is very educated. He's traveled the world. And yet, I'm wondering if he's reflective of a cultist mentality in the United States. I'd like you to comment on that in terms of those people who are supporting him. And I'd like you to comment on Pam Bondi and the head of the FBI, Patel, who are obviously covering up for him, I think, from where I'm sitting. But how do you see this unfolding parallel to what Trump is doing in Iran, what he did in Venezuela, and really the whole issue of peace in Ukraine has not gone away? What are your thoughts on that?
The Taiwan Strait hasn't gone away. The tariffs haven't gone away. The only thing that's gone away is the New START Treaty. Only thing that's gone away are limits on nuclear weapons expansion. Everything else is festering. And Trump is like a rat backed into a corner. He's desperate. He's likely to lash out. He lashed out verbally yesterday, effing this, effing that. Attacking the Supreme Court justices who he appointed, to the ones who put him down, as well as other Republicans. So, I mean, but he's got his cult followers. The Republican Party used to be a party. It was once the party of Abraham Lincoln. It was the party behind Reconstruction. Then it lost its way. But now it's turned into the Trump cult, the MAGA cult. And the people who still are loyal to Trump, they think he walks on water. They think he's infallible. But they were also the ones who believed the QAnon stuff about a ring of pedophiles, which has in large part been borne out. Those of us who dismiss that as crazy conspiracy thinking do see that, we knew that there was an international ruling class that colluded with each other to some extent. But now it's center and forward how vile, how corrupt, how slimy, how entitled, how above the law these people are, which is why bringing down Prince Andrew is so refreshing, such a breath of fresh air, because these people have such impunity. And Donald Trump is the most impugn of all those who think that they're impugn. And Pam Bondi is an absolute disgrace. Cash Patel, I talk about a rat in the corner. Who looks more like a rat than Cash Patel? These are the lowest of the low. But Pam Bondi's exchange with Congress this week, or was it last week now? I texted Congressman Jamie Raskin and Tom Massey and others because they handled this so beautifully, uh, the interrogation, and just showed, she has this book of insults. So if people ask her a question that she, as Attorney General, is supposed to be able to respond to, she would go to a third grade book of insults. I remember when we were in elementary school and we had all those rank outs, we used to call them. And so that's what she would resort to. It was embarrassing. It was, even the Republicans, the staunch Trump supporters, many of them commented on what an embarrassing performance it was. But they're there to do one thing, and that's to deflect from Donald Trump's participation in this vile, disgusting thing that was going on with these powerful men sexually abusing children. And Donald Trump knew about this, even made comments about it in things he said about Jeffrey Epstein. His comment that, yeah, he and Jeffrey Epstein like women, but Jeffrey Epstein likes them on the younger side. I mean, things like that Donald Trump did, things, his birthday greetings. Donald Trump was up to his eyeballs in this stuff, and it's his supporters who know how disgusting this is. To their credit, many of them were appalled by it, but now they want to turn a blind eye on this because they don't want to see their bully in chief go under. But Trump is going down, and the Republican Party are going down, and they're going to get slaughtered in the midterm elections next year. And they're trying to uh, either cancel the elections or somehow fix the elections beforehand. So Trump told Republican states to gerrymander so that he can get more votes. But the Republican brand is so unpopular. Trump keeps trying to say how great the economy is. Well, we got new economic news, and the economy is not doing well. On top of which, we don't know what's going to happen with these illegal tariffs. What, a couple $100 billion that they're going to have to give back in some form or other. So, Trump is in a weakened position, but he's more dangerous, and he's lashing out, and he's furious, and he's blaming people. And we knew before that he went on this revenge tour. That's what the second Trump term has been, is Trump's revenge tour, going after dozens of people who he deemed to be his enemies and holding on to his lies about the 2020 election being stolen and the so-called Democratic plans to steal this election. This is Trump flailing, swinging blindly, wildly, going against his enemies. And his enemies could be anybody who tells the truth. But, not that the Democrats are exactly, on the right page either. They do believe in maintaining the little bit of America, fragile democracy that the United States has. But it's still a government that's bought and paid for by the billionaires. They have more power and influence in the US now than they've ever had before. There was a period in the late 19th century that might have been comparable, but they now are openly running things and electing people and controlling the media in the United States and buying up more of it so they can try to control public opinion. It's not working, but it's a major factor in the United States. And it just shows the level of corruption. But also, the Democrats have been as big warmongers as the Republicans. So when it comes to the global scene, yeah, they want to oppose what Trump's doing, and maybe they can do it in a more subtle fashion. But they were also backing the genocide in Gaza, not quite as openly as Trump, but almost as openly. They were also in bed with Netanyahu. They were also supporting the trying to prolong the war in Ukraine as long as possible because they don't want to allow Putin to win and because they want to weaken Russia. They are also planning for U.S. coming to Taiwan's aid militarily, including possibly using nuclear weapons. So it's not as if the Democrats are going to march in and save the world or American democracy, but their brand is not quite as toxic as Donald Trump. The difference is there might be imperialists, but they're not domestic fascists, and they're not supporting every fascist movement around the globe the way Trump and Musk and their allies have been. So, the world is still in a very dangerous position, uh, but Trump represents the main threat right now to the human species, and the fact that there's nobody between him and the authorization to use nuclear weapons is really terrifying.
Yeah. Uh, you've covered a lot of ground, but I want to focus in on a couple of things that I think not enough people are paying attention to. Um, from where I'm sitting, I agree with you. I think the revelations about Prince Andrew, the revelations that are coming out about the Epstein Files, I've done 2 or 3 shows with some other people looking at it from different angles, but it definitely not looking good for Trump. This Kash Patel, he's frightening when you look at this guy. And then Pam Bondi.
He's also he's also dumb. It's not like he's a smart, conniving rat. He's a dumb rat, but
Yeah,
he's one who'll carry out Trump's wishes and orders, as is Pam Bondi. She was at least intelligent, but she acts like a fool. I mean, she so discredited herself. She's going to go down in history as the worst attorney general, as the most partisan, as the most open lackey of a president, and with no concern at all about the Constitution or her own reputation. I mean, she would be a
well,
laughingstock if she wasn't, if she couldn't ruin people's lives.
well, her reputation goes back to when she was Attorney General in Florida, and she's the one that refused to really go after Epstein. Gave him a really light sentence. He went into a minimum security kind of place. So she seems to be involved in this whole Epstein thing as well, going back to when she was in Florida. But I want to focus on something else you mentioned, and that's the United States economy. Trump has been boasting about how strong it is. Look at the stock market. And there's hardly any mention about the $38 trillion national debt that is rising by whatever it is, $1 trillion every 6 months. There's scarcely any mention about the $18 trillion household debt, which includes student debt. And I'm no economist. That's the furthest thing from my intellectual capability. But I've been following a number of economists from around the world and investors, and they are unanimous in predicting that this rising debt, that the now $1.5 trillion war budget, what Trump is doing around the world is not sustainable. I just think anybody with common sense that can look at that and think that this whole system is ready to crash. You mentioned about billions of dollars as a result of the Supreme Court decision that will probably have to be returned to those countries that were paying those tariffs. Peter.
But Regis, that's part of the misinformation. It's not the countries that pay the tariffs, it's the American consumers. So the US importers paid the tariffs and then they raised the prices. So that's why it's so chaotic. So it's the American consumers who really deserve that to get repaid by that $200 billion. But it's going to first go to the importers, Walmart and people like that, who then raised prices. They kept their profits, and the American people have been hurting. This was a tax on the American people. Trump's lie was always that other countries are going to pay that. But every economist who knew anything about it knew it was a tax on the American people, which is effectively what the Supreme Court was saying, that he didn't have the power of levying taxes, that's with Congress, and Trump is doing it, among the things he's doing. But you're right about the big picture, that the economy is shaky, very shaky. It's wobbly at this point. And Trump is the worst malefactor in that regard. Trump increased the American deficit and the debt at a faster rate in his first term in office. After Obama had gotten it under control, Trump blew it up again. And you're right to mention the $1.5 trillion defense, quote, they call it defense budget. As you say, it's a war budget. It's got nothing to do with defense, except the parts that are a boondoggle for the weapons manufacturers, like Star Wars and this Golden Dome idea. If Trump's idiotic idea is vapid and puerile prattling about a Golden Dome, which goes back to Reagan's childish idea in the 1980s that we can somehow put a dome over the United States and protect it from incoming missiles. I mean, we can go into it, but it's total fantasy. But what it is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar boondoggle for the merchants of death, the military contractors. So, yeah, Trump, and you're right to say that this does not get enough attention in the United States or globally. But there is another movement, the Global South, the BRICS, the SCO, African Union, a lot of Latin America wants to go a very, very different direction, much more represented by China and its Belt and Road Initiative. They want to develop a global, peaceful, real economic development, a new Silk Road of some sort. But as long as the United States, as long as the dollar remains the primary international currency, the United States can probably postpone this collapse for a while. I mean, I know people who looked at the economy back in the 70s, even the late 60s, and said we're heading for an imminent collapse. So for that reason, I don't try to predict when it's going to happen. All I know is it's going the wrong direction, and we're just piling on more and more debt. And the more debt, the shakier it is. And the debt service is an enormous expenditure now to just keep that debt from dragging everything down. And the various kinds of operations that Wall Street and London and others have been carrying on are not in the interest of the people in any of these countries. But that's why when I see this European rearmament, so many people are cheering that on and saying, yeah, it's about time they carried their own weight. This is the exact wrong thing to be doing. And that's what troubles me so much. Instead of talking about diplomacy, talking about ways to peacefully resolve differences, they're saying what we have to do is hunker down and dramatically increase our military spending. First to 2%, then to 5%, and next it'll be 10%. And where are we going to get that money? From the schools, from the housing programs, from the food programs, from the road building, from the building of transportation, other kinds of transportation, the things people need to live a good life. And I'm sorry to see it happening in Russia. I'm sorry to see it happening in Germany, in Britain, and the United States. I mean, the U.S. infrastructure is falling apart. In many ways, the U.S. is like what we used to call the third world country, an underdeveloped country. And people's lives, people are doing poorly economically in the U.S. Something like 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, don't have real savings. If they're hit by a big expense, they're going to go under. They're going to go on government subsidies as long as the government can do it. But Trump is also, and the Republicans are cutting that. They're cutting the food programs for poor kids. They're cutting a lot of the social services that people need. That's what's going to happen around the world. And again, the wrong direction. The people of the world insist that we go a different direction.
And I want to pick it up on that point. Russia, China, India, South America, South Africa, the BRICS, another 10 or 15 countries that are wanting to join. And what is happening there, which is not talked about enough, and these countries are denying that they are trying to get rid of the dollar, de-dollarization, but it's happening. They're beginning to trade in their own. They've been trading in their own currencies. They've already established alternatives to the IMF, the SWIFT, and the World Bank. And what's also not being reported, from what I can see, is that many of these countries, but primarily Russia, China, are getting rid of United States. Well, Russia supposedly had gotten rid of almost all United States bonds, debt. China has been quietly doing that. And what's going on, and I've been paying attention to this because I have some friends that have been just feeding me this information. These countries have been stockpiling gold. People are investing now in gold and silver and precious metals because that's tangible, whereas the US dollar is simply fiat currency. And so, Peter, when I look at what's happening and where I'm living in the Russian Federation and watching what's happening between Russia, China, and India, and trying to watch what's happening in the United States, I think an economic collapse is a certainty. When you mentioned that 60% of American people, and I guess that's probably pretty accurate, are living paycheck to paycheck. The other 40% are the people that we see filling sports stadiums, the Super Bowl, basketball, professional hockey, baseball. These stadiums are packed for all these sports, and yet the vast majority, 60%, are left just trying to survive. No savings to speak of. So,
and Peter, Regis, do you know what the charge is to go to one of these concerts? I got an email yesterday about a new Bruce Springsteen tour, and I love Bruce Springsteen. I'd love to go. And he's coming to National Park here in Washington. The cheapest seats when I checked, the cheapest seats way back, the nosebleed seats were starting at $380. You know, that's the cheapest. You know, you go to a Taylor Swift concert or any of these, even the ones you would like to go to are just outrageous. So, but it's not 40%, it's maybe 10%. But the ones who are really making out like bandits are the upper 1/10 of 1%. You know, the multimillionaires, the billionaires, they get richer and richer. The gap between rich and poor widens all the time. The richest 6 people in the world have more wealth than the bottom half of the global population, and they're so greedy. They're trying to. Anytime there's talk about a billionaire tax, then people start picking up and leaving and moving someplace else where they're not going to have to pay the tax. They were talking about 1 or 2% tax. I would like to see a 90% or 99% tax, depending on what level. People can still live outrageously luxuriant lives on 1/100th of what they've got. The Elon Musks and the others, they're just so greedy, and they think that this is going to make them happy when many of them have miserable lives. And this is not what makes somebody feel good about themselves, except in the worst kind of capitalist valuation.
Well, Peter, this has been a very engaging conversation. I don't know if you've been watching in the comments section, but we've had some pretty good comments and some activity that I really haven't had up until this point. There's been quite a few of them that have raised a number of really good points, and so I want to thank everybody who's watching. I want to thank everybody who's commented. I really do appreciate it more than anything. And Peter, I've been shadow banned, been permanently deleted from YouTube, and I don't have a great following like a lot of people, but the shows that I produce and the topics that I explore with guests like you, people are not going to find that anywhere else. So on the one hand, I want to thank everybody that was watching. Please like and share this show if you appreciate this information and these guests. And Peter, I can't thank you enough for